heard a rhythmic beating coming from above as I rode the elevator upstairs to my apartment. It sounded like drumming, but there were also women's voices. When the elevator doors opened, it was no surprise to me where the noise was coming from. My home. The women's voices proclaimed in chorus, "I am in the center of light. I am here to express delight." Repeatedly. I put my key in the door, threw down my backpack, and nodded quickly to my mother and her friends, who were bare-breasted. And in case there was any question, in the center of light and here to express delight. This was just another Tuesday after school for me in 5th grade. The chanting was led by my mother's friend, a Buddhist nun who was living with us for a few months. My mom really dug the whole Buddhist thing and even thought about joining the order herself, until she learned that Buddhist nuns are not allowed to wear lipstick. She took that as a sign from the universe that it was not meant to be, and that she would manifest the abundance of spirit in some other way. At least this was better than the energy healer who came to live with us the year earlier. And then there was also a rebirther who did group sessions in our living room, transforming our home into a new age maternity ward with grown-ass adults lying on the floor and reenacting their birth. It was like being born again, but for the patchouli crowd. These people wrapped themselves up in our blankets and pillows so that they could recreate a womb-like environment. And I could never quite look at my pillows the same way, knowing that they doubled as some random vagina. And to this day, my mother has 7 decorative blue crystal eggs, ranging in size from tennis ball to toddler, in her apartment, strategically positioned to prevent toxins from seeping into her water. Recently, she showed me a magical necklace that she just purchased to clean the bad electricity from around her and shield her from the ear cancer she would otherwise get from her phone, a rotary landline. But also, who cares? My mom is wacky, but she is also incredibly fun. She's loving, she's irresistibly glamorous, and she has this internal magnet that draws gay men to her, like bees. Like bees are instinctively drawn to their queen. Her new age magical thinking doesn't hurt anybody, so I figure, just let her be her. Decades after the topless Center of Light jam session with the nuns, I became a mother myself. A baby girl named Katie. One evening, after she just turned a year old, my husband William and I took Katie to a Sesame Street live show at the San Diego Sports Arena. We heard all of the classics like C is for Cookie and Kermit the Frog lamenting how hard it is to be green. And then Katie suddenly held up her hands, splayed her fingers, and began to shake. I elbowed William, and I said, "My God, she must be really excited. She's vibrating." His eyes widened and watched as he watched her. Katie's having a seizure. And then we raced to the emergency room. While there, Katie continued having seizures, 20 of them, in front of the ER doctors who had no idea why. They sent us to a pediatric neurology office at Children's Hospital, where we waited in a reception area with children also suffering from neurological problems, one more serious than the next. An old school doctor who looked like he was straight out of an episode of Marcus Welby, MD, told us that there were 3 possible outcomes. Katie could be fine, she could have severe developmental delays, or, he told us, without the kind of pause that was really necessary, Katie could die. And then he asked us the most important question of any medical exam. What type of insurance do you have? The doctor told us that there was a pediatric neurologist at UCLA who was doing groundbreaking treatment, but that it would mean paying out of pocket. The initial visit alone was $500. We were new parents with limited incomes, but with the exchange of a glance, we decided we'd charge the visit to our credit cards. While we were still there at Children's Hospital, the doctor decided to do an EEG, which meant taping 32 wires to Katie's head, wrapping them up in white gauze turban, and then measuring her brain activity. I looked at her sweet face, plump as a peach, her wide blue eyes looking at me with complete and total trust. And I thought, you are not allowed to die. I turned to the nurse and I told her I was sorry I didn't bring a camera to photograph Katie. Despite the fact that I was terrified, I couldn't help notice that she looked incredibly, stunningly, angelically chic in that turban. She did. The nurse said, "Oh, honey, you don't want to remember this moment." But I did, because I didn't know how many more I would get with Katie. Later, I called my mother to tell her about Katie's seizures and the experimental treatment in LA. "Tell me what I can do to support you, darling. I will do whatever you need." "Okay, do you have $500? My mother sighed. "You know I don't believe in Western medicine. I couldn't in good conscience give you money for a doctor." I didn't argue. This was a woman who once had a spiritual steam cleaner remove dead souls that were stuck in our carpet. And I figured, maybe she just doesn't have $500 to spare, and that's fair. The following day, my mother called me, and she told me she needed some of Katie's palm sweat. Wait, what? Her palm sweat? Mom, what are you talking about? "There's a psychic surgeon in Brazil who can heal people by putting their photo into a light machine and praying over their palm sweat. It's a treatment that's an alternative to radionics." An alternative to radionics? What the fuck is radionics? And how am I supposed to get Katie's palm sweat to you? And what the hell is a psychic surgeon? And Mom, is there a charge for this? Katie's health does not have a price tag. We have to do this for her. How much is this palm sweat hocus pocus going to cost you, Mom? Would anybody like to guess? Yes, amazing. $500. $500 to put my daughter's picture under flashing colored lights in Brazil while some freaky-ass psychic surgeon prayed over her palm sweat. But in that moment, I realized that my mother was hurting too. Katie's seizures terrified her. They affected all of us. Providing Katie's palm sweat would give my mother peace of mind. And it couldn't hurt her, so I went along with my mom's plan, wishing so much that I too could believe in magic. My mother was able to completely let go of all of her fear after I sent a sheet of paper with Katie's palm sweat on it and let this Brazilian guru do his thing. Katie continued to have seizures for months, baffling every neurologist who examined her. My husband, William, became an amateur neuroscientist and learned how to videotape and chart seizures so that he can intelligently discuss patterns with the team at UCLA, who was fascinated by her case. I will admit for a moment that I entertained the idea that Katie was performing for attention. I mean, this was, after all, my kid. And people did make fuss. They made a big fuss over those seizures. But there was no mistaking that her body was out of her control when this was happening. Her neck would stiffen, her jaw locked, and the little girl looked terrified. So was I. But I did my best to remain calm during them, and I feigned nonchalance so I wouldn't alarm her. I would say, "Oh, it looks like you're having another seizure. You know them. They should be over pretty soon." Then, after a year, when Katie was 2 years old, she just kind of accepted that seizures were part of her life. She started announcing them before they happened, which her doctors said was impossible, until they witnessed my 2-year-old saying, "Seashore coming, seashore coming." The team at UCLA insisted it was not possible for a person to predict their own seizures before they came. And I couldn't help feeling just a little pride. My baby was at the head of the class, seizure-wise. We tried a variety of medical treatments, and my mother's chanting circle was still helping in their way, proclaiming now that Katie was in the center of light and here to express delight. One day, when Katie was almost 3 years old, she told me she wanted to watch her seizures next time they happened. This was not the weirdest thing I had ever heard in my life. So I told her, "Next time you feel one coming on, let me know. I'll scoop you up and bring you in front of the full-length mirror, and you can watch." Which we did. When she was finished with her seizure, she turned to me and said, "I done with seashores." Which, miraculously, she was. Nearly 20 years later, I sat beside William and my mother, watching Katie graduate from college, ironically, with a degree in neuroscience. And as our girl crossed the stage and accepted her diploma, my mother placed a hand over mine, the left one with the braid of healing metals wrapped around her wrist. "I feel such gratitude for today," said my mother, tearing up and shaking her head. "The universe is so filled with miracles, isn't it? I mean, thank God for that psychic surgeon." Thank you.
That's Jennifer Coburn.